Yeah, everybody knows it's there. We just say, "Oh, well, Aunt Jean has a bad knee."
Mhm.
And we just accept it that, "Oh, yeah, she's gonna have pain. She's not gonna be able to do a lot of things." To me, that's not acceptable. You don't say, "Well, Aunt Jean has cancer." Yeah, it's just something that happens. What do? You go and you treat it. It doesn't seem like there should be any difference when you have a bum knee or a whatever it is, a bad ankle or all of these things which end up causing not only just the pain that's associated with it, but then cause metabolic disease because you can't move enough.
In this episode, I sit down with Professor Keith Baar, who's a world-renowned expert in the molecular mechanisms behind muscle and tendon adaptation in the body. And we talk about what the science says about building healthy connective tissue and overcoming injury in tendons, ligaments, and bone, and why that's such an important determinant for your quality of life. We also cover how proper nutrition and pharmaceuticals impact that process and a whole lot more. I found it to be a fascinating conversation, and I hope you enjoy it.
The biggest thing is that even when we look at the spine, a lot of what we have in the spine, yeah, we're going to end up with having, say, we're going to have disc issues or we're going to have alignment issues. A lot of it is coming from the fact that we have small problems with the tendons and ligaments that are supposed to be stabilizing the spine. And as those things become deteriorated, that then leads to weakness, that then leads to lack of alignment, which leads to these disc issues. So a lot of those things are actually secondary to problems that are really the cause of which are just these small movements. We get, oh, did something to my neck or my back, and we never kind of fix them properly.
Mhm.
And so the result is that we get all of these connective tissue injuries. They accumulate over time. And that's going to be the biggest number one thing that is decreasing your number of pain-free years. So that's what we use as a measure. So basically, for pain-free movement is what our goal is. And so that's general. That's everybody. It's just that there's a much bigger push for it in elite sport because 70% of what elite sport athletes are missing things too are tendon ligament issues.
Mhm.
So as a result, they're super focused on at least trying to understand what's going on. When we go into the general population, yeah, everybody knows it's there. We just say, "Oh, well, Aunt Jean has a bad knee."
Mhm.
And we just accept it that, "Oh, yeah, she's gonna have pain. She's not gonna be able to do a lot of things."
Mhm.
To me, that's not acceptable. You don't say, "Well, Aunt Jean has cancer." Yeah, it's just something that happens. What do? You go and you treat it. Uh, it doesn't seem like there should be any difference when you have a bum knee or a whatever it is, a bad ankle or all of these things which end up causing not only just the pain that's associated with it, but then cause metabolic disease because you can't move enough. There's a good study in NFL players where if you rupture your Achilles or your ACL, you have 50% more heart attacks than somebody who hasn't. Just because you don't do your activities of daily living as much, you don't do as much of the normal activity that you do. As a result, you have greater metabolic disease and you have almost 50% higher rate of heart attacks.
Absolutely. So I couldn't agree with you more that the overall goal is to add quality years to a person's life as much as possible. I've talked extensively about the idea that, mobility and strength and overall functionality is one of the biggest contributors to quality of life. And when those things go south and you throw in pain on top of that, it can ruin a quality of life very quickly.
Yep. And when the tendons and ligaments say in your ankle aren't working, your balance goes to shit. So
Yeah.
as a result, you're gonna have more falls, you're gonna have more of these other things, and it's something that we all know because we say, "Oh, yeah, if you're the longer you can, say, stand on one foot and put your sock and shoe on the other foot, if you can do that, that's a great sign of." But the reason people can't do that is because the small musculature and the tendons that go into the foot don't work properly.
So,
Now
yeah, talk to me about what happens in connective tissue with aging. And
sure.
I want to layer into this disuse. I know it's hard to tease those two apart and say how much of is coming from one and how much is coming from the other. So Maybe we could start with just the known changes that occur in connective tissue with aging.
So it's a great question, and it's a little bit problematic because there are so many changes that are happening with age in the musculoskeletal system that when you try and identify, say, in a person, if I measure, say, try and measure stiffness in a person using ultrasound and muscle force, the problem is that you've lost so much of your force and you've lost so much of how quickly you can develop force that we're not actually loading the tendon the same in a young person as we are in the old person. So for some more specific things, we go to model organisms like animals. And if we look at animals, it's very clear that as with most of us are in our experience, most of us think that we get stiffer as we age. That's right. It's joint stiffness. But if you actually look at the ultrasound measures of kind of tendon stiffness in an older person, it actually says that it's less stiff. Well, that's probably down to all of these other systems that you're using as a way to kind of get that measurement and not the reality. What we think is happening as we get older is we get a progressive increase in stiffness. The reason that we get stiffer is not necessarily, so there's two major things that are going to be really important as far as connective tissue that we talk about and we use kind of interchangeably. One of them is stiffness. And that's going to be basically how much load does it take me to pull on this structure? Okay. So that's one thing that's really important because that stiffness is telling me the stiffness of everything in that area. Okay. There's a second thing. It's called elasticity. And elasticity isn't the inverse of stiffness. It doesn't mean that it's stretchy. The inverse of stiffness is compliance. So if it's really compliant, it means it doesn't give you much resistance, the whole structure. What elasticity is most tendons, they're not just one piece. What they have is they have multiple pieces. And normally, when I'm a baby and I can stick my foot in my mouth, what happens is those pieces slide past each other. And we get this nice movement. But because there's so many lubricating proteins between those two sections, we actually store and return the energy really well. So in a sense that when you have high elasticity, you still get a lot of energy return, which is why we want to have stiffer tendons. We get more energy back than we put, or a higher percentage of the energy back that we put into the tendon. But when we have elasticity, the separate parts are still moving. When we have stiffness, everything's just stuck. Okay. And I think that's much more of what we have as we get older. Is that we get this stiffness between, say, we have the gastroc and the soleus and maybe even the small things like the plantaris and the flexor hallucis, your big toe muscle. Okay, so all of those things have to kind of slide past each other. But if they all kind of stick together in a gloop, then what we get is we get this increase in stiffness to the point where the structures are just stiff and stuck together. That's when we go in and we use ART or something, we can release one of those from that. Now we get better movement. That returns, say, our big toe movement because we've allowed that flexor muscle to slide past those other muscles and those other tendons. The elasticity component allows me to store and return lots of energy. I don't lose a lot because there's so much lubrication that I don't lose a lot to heat or friction. When I have a stiff structure, everything's just stuck together. So you can imagine that a stiff structure is not necessarily good when things have to move past each other. So like in our patellar tendon, the superficial layer and the deep layer work at different angles. So when we bend our knee a long way, the deep layer gets more of the load. When we bend our knee a shorter distance, now the superficial level gets it. If we look at our Achilles, it twists as it goes through. And as it does that, some of the different sections have to move. And that's really important for the function of the tissue, the elasticity of the tissue. So stiffness is basically how hard it is to pull. Elasticity is how much energy we get back when we pull it.
So is it fair to say for a healthy tendon, what we're looking for is kind of a Venn diagram between these two things with lots of overlap?
Yeah. So we want a lot of elasticity. So we want as high an elasticity as we can, because what that means is that when we load the tendon, that section that we're loading stretches and recoils. And because it's nice and loose against the other stuff, what happens is it's sliding. All of that movement is happening with very little friction. And so now we're getting more energy back for free. So when I go to walk, it takes me less energy to walk.
That's right.
because all of those structures are moving. There's good lubrication. I'm not losing all of my muscle energy as heat. And so now I can store and return that energy. So what we want is we want to maximize elasticity.
Okay.
The stiffness is within that section that is moving. I want that section to be independently stiff. That's great. I
Mhm.
don't want the whole structure to be stiff because that means it's interconnected and it won't move very well around the joint. And the stiffness is basically our tendons are like ropes that have lots of fibers in them, but instead of them being, say, hemp fiber or some other kind of some other botanical fiber, our fibers are made up of collagen, and that collagen is making up our ropes. How cross-linked those collagen molecules are is going to determine how stiff they are. So if I cross-link them together a lot, they become stiff.
Mhm.
So if I don't have very much collagen, but I have a lot of the cross-links, now I've got a brittle tendon. That happens when we're inactive. That happens when we get older. That happens when you're in a cast, for example. So if you're in a boot, we take the boot off, your tendon has lost a lot of the collagen in it.
Mhm.
But because you've been eating, you've had all this other stuff happening, the collagen that's there is cross-linked. So it's highly stiff, but it's not very strong.
Mhm.
Okay. So by contrast, if you get out and you do your 7 to 10,000 steps every day and you get good movement, that's going to give us a stimulus to make more collagen.
Mhm.
But whether we make that stiff or not is dependent on what type of activity we do.
Mhm.
And so if we just have more collagen and it's not very stiff, now that's still a time where we can tear that tendon. And the difference is that if you think of it is if I'm pulling, now instead of me pulling on a piece of very thin glass, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull on something that's super stretchy, like a rubber, like gum. I could have a nice piece of gum. I can stretch it a long way, and it's gonna. And everybody knows, and everybody's done this. You take a piece of gum, you pull it, it's always going to break. That's the other time that we break our tendons or rupture our tendons is when we have a little too much stiffness,
Mhm.
or sorry, a little too much compliance, a little too stretchy.
Mhm.
Okay. So those are the two extremes. And so what we want to do is we want to be in the middle. And
Mhm.
we want to have a good amount of collagen because that's going to make the tissue stronger. And then we want to have it pretty well cross-linked because that's going to make it stiffer. And that means that we get more energy back when we put our foot into the ground.
Mhm.
And that doesn't matter whether you're walking, you're running, you're doing any type of activity.
Mhm.
If I put my foot onto the ground and I can get more of the energy back that I put into it,
Mhm.
that's going to make it easier for me to run or walk or do whatever activity I want to do.
Okay. Would you tease out the difference for me between adhesions that form that stick layers together and
Mhm.
cross links?
Yeah, so the adhesions that are going to form between molecules are often just there's going to be collagen, there's going to be other things that can go between different layers. So a lot of times people might know that we have all of this stuff called fascia, which are these looser connective tissues that kind of go around our muscles and our each little individual muscle, each little individual tendon has its own little covering of connective tissue.
Mhm.
And those things can start to stick together a little bit that you get these adhesions. The best thing that we can come up with as to what explains these adhesions is that there's likely collagen molecules that are going across. You're getting a buildup of collagen between the layers and it becomes sticky,
Mhm.
right? And it becomes, you get that adhesion component. That's when, releasing the adhesion is going to improve our elasticity, our movability, our movement quality. And so the problem is that when we do that, if I just do that with you today, what'll happen is you'll go to sleep tonight and those things will form again overnight and it'll be stuck again to some degree. The more we do it, the more frequently we do those types of movements that encourages the sliding, the less of those adhesions we form between those two different tissues.
Mhm.
And so that's different than what happens within each individual tissue and each individual collagen molecule or the fascicles within the collagen. And so those things can be cross-linked by an enzyme. It's called lysoloxidase, which is the primary thing that we want to happen in our body. And that's a really important enzyme because it's going to lead to a lot of the things that we see as differences between men and women. And it's really underappreciated. We did some really cool work in our engineered ligaments where we make these little ligaments in a dish. We made them from men, from cells that we isolated from guys who'd ruptured their ACL. We had we'd done the same thing with women who had ruptured their ACL, and the ACLs come out about the same. Even though in people, women will rupture their ACL between 4 and 9 times more than men will. And so that was interesting to us because there wasn't anything intrinsic in it being a male cell or a female cell. They produced about the same amount of collagen. The female cells produced a little bit more and about the same amount of strength. But what we then did is we then went in and kind of we mimicked the estrogen cycle or the menstrual cycle. And so what we did is we went in with a low level of estrogen for 12 days, and then we went up to the high level of estrogen you see around the luteal surge or right before ovulation. And that's about 100-fold increase in estrogen. And what we found is when we went up 100-fold in the estrogen content, within 2 days, the tendons became less stiff, even though they had more collagen. And so we've already talked about it enough so that your listeners will know that that means that there's probably a change in cross-linking. And that's in fact what happened is that the enzyme lysoloxidase became inhibited directly by estrogen. And so by 24 hours, we decreased that activity by 75%. And by 48 hours, it was down another 10 or so percent. So it was down to about 80%. It was 15% of the activity that it had in the controls.
So within this menstrual cycle, each month, a woman's connective tissue and tendons are actually remodeling themselves based on hormonal changes.
What is happening, and there's good data from Schultz and a bunch of other people, if they pull on women's knees across their cycle, as they get to ovulation, their knees actually pull about 1 millimeter more than they would pull when they were menstruating. So they pull about 4 millimeters when they're menstruating, about 5 millimeters when they're in that ovulation stage. So what that's telling us is that even in people, we're seeing this variability in the stiffness of a tissue like the ACL, a tendon or a ligament like that. And so we had shown that we've published the data with estrogen. We haven't published the data with testosterone, but it has the opposite effect. It actually increases the activity of lysoloxidase. And what we get is we get a stiffer tendon, but we actually get less collagen. And so it does become more brittle. And that's what happened in kind of 1990s baseball when the guys were taking all these anabolic steroids. They got a lot of testosterone, which meant that they were inhibiting they were activating lysoloxidase, but that they had less collagen. So what they did is they had small amounts of collagen with lots of cross-linking. As we already said, that's a brittle tendon. So they all got these significant injuries that happened that really were the limitations to their performance. So this not only explains the differences in, say, tendon ruptures or ACL ruptures or muscle pulls between men and women, it explains some of the differences in power between men and women, because if I have a stiffer connective tissue, I can transmit force faster and better, so I have better power. But it also explains blood pressure to some degree, because blood pressure tends to be higher in men. Again, stiffer collagen in the aorta means that there's more resistance to when the heart beats. As that is lower in women up until menopause, what's going to happen is that you're getting this weekly or monthly decrease in stiffness of that tissue. You lose it with menopause, so that reverses it. But up until menopause, there's a really nice effect where you get less stiffness in the aorta and some of those big blood vessels, so blood pressure is lower. So you can explain a lot of physiological things based on this one modification to the connective tissue.
It's super interesting. For my audience who are not sports scientists, can you just reference the difference in incidence of ACL tears in females versus males?
Yeah, so men will, so let's just say, so the women will rupture an ACL about, in the military, the data is about 9 times more. So 9-fold higher rate. In soccer, it's about 4-fold. So the same sport, if they look at the professional levels of soccer, women are rupturing their ACL about 4 times more than the men.
Wow.
The interesting thing is, because we get muscle pulls when the tendon is stiffer than the muscle is strong, women are actually getting about 70% fewer muscle pulls. Because again, the tendon's less stiff, so that means you get fewer muscle pulls. But because the connective tissues are less stiff, you get more ACL ruptures. And so if you look at the difference in incidence rate of these injuries, men tend to pull muscles, women tend to pull or rupture ligaments. Because men's tendons because again, the lysyl oxidase is higher activity, the men's tendons are going to be stiffer. So if the muscle isn't super strong, that tendon is not going to stretch. The muscle is going to stretch, and that's when we get those muscle pulls.
Yeah.
So
It reminds me of when the NBA first put in high top shoes, and they were like, look, all the ankle injuries are gone, but everybody started blowing out their knees.
yeah, there is some of that.
So, talk to me a little bit about what conventional medicine and physical therapy are getting wrong with rehabilitating these types of injuries.
Yeah, so I think the easiest ones for your listeners to understand are kind of like, oh, you hurt your rotator cuff, because everybody hurts their rotator cuff. This is a combination of, smallish muscles that stabilize the shoulder with these tendons that stabilize the shoulder. And so what do? You get a little stretchy band, and you do 1,000 little stretchy band exercises. And that doesn't do anything. The reason it doesn't do anything is because when you damage a tendon, it is the reason that you don't get improvement in that tendon is because the tendon needs load to get, the tendon only exists in load. It only repairs itself with the right load. When you damage a little bit of your tendon and you get something like a tendinopathy, you will never fix that if you don't get load through it. And so I always do a demonstration. I'm just prepping here. So, I've got my little piece of paper. It's got lines on it. Paper is great because it's made out of wood fiber. It's got the same principles, or the same, very similar to collagen fibers that make up our tendons. So if I have this and I stretch, I get really good strength because I'm pulling it. Everything is relatively aligned between those. If I injure this just by tearing it because I overdid it, it was a beautiful day. I went out and golfed, or I did too many backhands on the tennis court. Now I've got some sort of injury. If I get load through there, that what's going to happen is it's going to rupture. But if I load it just by doing those really light dynamic moves that I'm swinging my little arm, no load's getting through here. And so what that is that's called stress shielding. And what stress shielding is when the healthy part of the tissue is taking on all the stress so that the injured part of the tissue doesn't get loaded. Evolutionarily, it makes a lot of sense. If this were to tear all the way through, what would happen is you'd be meat for somebody who is chasing you. And so to prevent that, what we're going to do is we're going to make it so that no load goes through here. The problem is I can produce a complete tendinopathy just by taking the load off a tendon. And this was first done by this Japanese group from Hayashi is the lead investigator there. And all he did was he took a wire and he unloaded a tendon, perfectly healthy tendon. And within 3 to 6 weeks, what he had was when he looked at it, it had 10 times the number of cells in it. It had smaller molecules of collagen. The collagen was not directionally oriented, and it ruptured at a lower force. Those, by definition, are what we find in a scar. Okay, so a scar is, by definition, an area of tissue that has more cells, that has smaller collagen molecules that aren't aligned. So he produced a scar just by taking the load off. So the reason that we get a scar in our tissues is because there's no load going through there. And so now what we have to do is we have to, instead of doing our little stretchy band, which is only loading the healthy part, what we have to do is we have to change the type of load that we do. And I can get this to tear just by getting load through this, by even putting a small amount of load through this and just holding. Because just like the collagen molecules in our tendons, what's going to happen is if I do this long enough, what'll happen if I just am patient enough is that those molecules, those fibers, those wood fibers, begin to relax. It's a process when I do it like that, that's called stress relaxation. If I'm doing it with my muscles, it's called creep. Either way, what happens is if I pull and hold, and instead of using a stretchy band and going 1,000 of these, if I just do one, where I pull it and I keep pulling it and I hold it there, and I keep pulling it and I keep pulling it and I feel, oh yeah, I can feel the tension there. I don't have to pull it with maximal force. I actually want to do it with about half maximal force at most. It should be a pain-free movement. I'm just going to pull and hold. I'm going to hold it. I'm going to hold it for 30 seconds. Because what's happening is the strong parts are relaxing. And as the strong parts relax, they become less stiff than the injured part. And now the injured part, as you saw in the little demonstration, the injured part gets load through it. And so now the load goes through the full tissue instead of just the healthy part. And now I can fix that injured part. And so if we stop doing the little, the little movements that are just against little tiny bits of resistance, we've damaged it, so we can't use a lot of load. Okay. But then the way that you're loading is to do it dynamically. That means do 20, 30, 40 loads. If you do, we've got these beautiful experiments in animals where we do either 360 short, quick loads, or we do 4 30-second isometric holds. The amount of time that tendon is under tension, if we add it all up, is exactly the same.
Wow.
The difference in gene expression that we get from holding the 30-second holds, all of the genes that we turn on are tendon-related genes. When we did the load that was dynamic, we didn't turn on those tendon genes. We actually turned on cartilage genes. That's a little bit of an artifact because we put a hole into the middle of the tendon instead of the side. When we put it into the middle, as we pull on it, you get what's called radial compression. The outsides, the strong parts, start coming together. Think of it like one of those finger traps where you put your fingers into that little woven piece of fabric, and then you try and get your fingers out. You can't pull it out. So as we're pulling on that tendon, it's actually squeezing on the cells. That gives them a signal to become cartilage. And so just by changing from going the exact same amount of load, but instead of delivering it in these short bouts, like running, walking, jumping, any of those types of things, instead we do it like a wall sit, or we do it like an isometric lunge or something like that. We dramatically change the signal that goes to our tendons. We make it from being something that only goes through the good parts of our tissue to something that goes through the whole tissue, including the injured part. And when the injured part gets that stimulus, it can now reorient, it can now start to make collagen in the right direction, and it can now fix itself. Until you do that, I don't care if you want to go in and get PRP, if you want to get, if you're big into peptides and you like BPC 157, if you want to do a Wolverine, none of those things are going to work until you get load through that tissue. And once you get load through that tissue, whether you've done any of those other things, whether you put in stem cells or what, none of that stuff matters. It's about getting the load through it.
Beautiful. I love what you just did there. You covered so much that I feel like I need to go back and review some of this for everyone. What you started off there with is tendons do not exist in the absence of load. So what I want my audience to think of here is the idea of what happens to astronauts' bones when they go up into space and there's no gravity on them. They deteriorate rapidly. And we could say that the exact same thing are happening in connective tissue when there's no load on them.
Absolutely. So really, and we've seen this in studies that we do in rats, that if we put our 3D printed cast onto a rat or a mouse, within 3 days, the tendon has lost 20% of its collagen.
Wow. 3 days from a healthy tendon, it loses 20% of its collagen.
Yeah. And if we go 7 or 14 days, it doesn't lose much more. So it happens really quickly, and then it reaches this kind of baseline, this lower level. And so if you think about it, one of the reasons that these things are really pervasive is that we'll try and do something to fix whatever problem we have, tennis elbow, golfers, whatever it is. We'll be good about it for a week or so, and then something will happen. We'll get sick. We'll stop for a little bit, and then we'll take 2 or 3 days off of our loading. We come back, oh yeah, the pain's back again. Because what we're doing is we're just giving enough of a dose to kind of control the pain, but not fix the tissue. And then anytime that you go through a period of rest again, that tissue is going to get smaller. And the result is that as you go back to load it again, it's going to have the same issue that it had before.
Yes.
So you haven't fixed it.
Yes. So what happens when you do not provide load is the tendon atrophies rapidly, and you start to get scar tissue formation, right? So we get the disorganization of fibers, you get more fibers, all of the things that you mentioned before. And the disorganization, I want my audience to think of like a spider web. Like it's laid down in all directions because the body's just doing a messy patch job to try and put things together as quickly as possible. And as you said earlier, without the load, it doesn't know which way to organize the fibers.
Right.
Stress shielding that you mentioned earlier is, my audience is going to understand the term compensation. So the body's finding a workaround to go around the damaged tissue to keep the person functional. What we want to do is specifically load the damaged area, and that's where the isometrics that you're talking about come in, so that we're going to override the compensation and get the load where it needs to go to actually repair the tissue. Is that accurate?
Right. Yeah. So if you think about it, there's two things. One is the first thing is the idea of the scar being non-directional. So you think of it like if you're in an avalanche and you tumbled over, you stop at the bottom. What you're supposed to do is make a hole, take some snow and drop it, because you don't know which way is up. So if you think, okay, I'm facing this way, that must be up, and you start digging, you might dig in the wrong direction. All of the cells within your damaged tissue, they don't know to drop the snow, and they're just digging in whatever direction they think is best. And so it becomes completely random. As far as the injury, the way to think about the injury is, if you look at a river and you've got a beautifully running river and you put a big boulder in it, that's what the injury is. The injury is the boulder. So it doesn't mean the river stops. The river goes around it. So if I want to get back to the point where I have a full thickness of water, doesn't matter how much water I put around it. It's just going to flow super fast. That rock is still going to be there. But if I put a little dam right below it and I stop the movement and I hold the movement, what's going to happen is the depth is going to come up, and now we're not going to see that rock anymore. Okay. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to come up with different ways that we can get load through that, or return the tissue so that it's a full thickness again. And so ideally, in that, that's the analogy is with the rock, is just the idea is that when you look at it, now we've got a full thickness tendon, we've got a full sheet of water. It's not perfect, but again, that's not really what we do physiologically. Physiologically would actually, as we do it, the pressure would build up and the rock would get swept away. But what we do is, instead of just trying to say, okay, we got to put more load through that, that's like turning the river to go faster. Doesn't make it so that the rock disappears. It just means everything goes around it that much faster. So the only way to actually get it is to stop the movement completely. And that's what we do with an isometric, is we stop the movement. And now over time, if we wait long enough, we're going to get a rising that's going to basically make it so the rock disappears. Okay. So that's what we're trying to do with these longer hold isometrics. And so what we're going to do is we're going to do, for most people, they can become pain-free very quickly by doing about 4 30-second isometric holds through that region. The hardest part for most of your listeners is to figure out which tendon is the problem. Because a lot of times, especially when there's stuff stuck together or there's a joint like an ankle or a shoulder, really it's about diagnosing the problem. Because if you can go to somebody and they can diagnose the problem, oh yeah, you have, say a subscapularis tendon issue. And really what that does is that extends your elbow that way, and it helps you internally rotate. If you tell me that, that's great. All I need you to do now is take a belt and put it at top of a door, pull on it, produce tension there so that you can feel tension trying to rotate it down, just trying to do that rotation. Hold it for 30 seconds, let that off, take a minute or two, do it again, do that 4 times. Our biggest problem is that because doing those isometrics are analgesic, that means they blunt the pain or they decrease pain, that people are pain-free long before the tissue is healed. And so what we like to tell them is that your loading is a lot like an antibiotic. The first time you take it, it's already going to start to feel better. And by 2 or 3 of the antibiotics, you feel great again. But you still got to continue the course. You got to finish the whole course. And for us, the whole course lasts about 8 weeks. So if you do daily loading for 8 weeks, that whole tissue should have completely regenerated itself at the end of that time. And so if you stop after 1, 2 weeks because, oh, it feels really good, my shoulder's great, I'm back to playing pickleball, whatever it is, the problem hasn't gone away. You're going to go through a period where you can't play for a couple of days, and then it's going to come back because we didn't fully fix the tissue. So what we want to make sure people do is they say, okay, here's my first week of loading. Oh yeah, it feels a lot better. Let me keep doing that. Like taking my antibiotics. Let me take those antibiotics for the full course, finish the course. Now the tissue is healed. Now I don't have to do those as frequently, maybe once or twice a week, just to keep it in good shape. And now what you've got is a way that you've totally controlled the pain and the injury associated with that problematic tendon.
Talk to me a little bit about the parameters. You mentioned earlier that what we want to do is be in the 40 to 50% of maximum intensity range. We don't need to pull super hard. We know that we want to pull isometrically. We know that we're looking for about 30 seconds worth of contraction. And 4 rounds, you said, that's once a day?
Yeah, you can do it once a day. You can do it twice a day. It's again, it depends on what other things you're doing.
Mhm.
So if people are to the point where they can't do their activities that they like to do, then doing it twice a day is totally fine, because what you're doing is you're giving it two different signals. And we would separate those by about 8 hours of time, because the signal for our connective tissue, um, you only get about 10 minutes to get that signal in. So by the end of 10 minutes, the connective tissues have all the signal they need, and they're not really going to listen to you to get more signal. So everything over 10 minutes is just going to be wear and tear. So if you want to do 30 minutes of walking, and you have knee problems or ankle problems, you'd actually do better to do 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes around lunchtime, 10 minutes at the end of the day. That would give you 3 stimuli, or 2 to 3 stimuli for your connective tissue, the same stimulus for your heart and your muscles, your skeletal muscles, and it would give you that nice signal to wear and tear ratio would be higher. Ideally, what you would do is 2 15-minute sessions where they're split by 8 hours. And that would be really good, because now I've got, from that same 30 minutes, I've got 2 stimuli for my tendons, my ligaments, my cartilage, and my bone. And so that's a very simple thing that people can do, where you start your day and you finish your day with some sort of activity that's going to get load through those joints that are problematic. That's perfect. That's the ideal situation. Because what we've done is we've done that short little bit. It's been enough to give us a big stimulus to our tendons, ligaments, and bones. And now what we're going to do is, instead of just keeping going for the whole 30 minutes, that would be one signal that lasted 10 minutes with 30 minutes of wear and tear. Or I can get 2 signals that last 10 minutes with a total of 30 minutes. It's still 30 minutes of wear and tear, but now I got 2 signals for positive adaptation.
Mhm.
And the result is that I'm going to get twice the stimulus for adaptation for my tendons, ligaments, cartilage, and bone, and the same amount of a stimulus for my cardiac muscles and my skeletal muscles.
Mhm.
So simply dividing up your exercise into those 2 little exercise snacks, more or less,
Mhm.
is going to be better for you than actually going for a long period of time just doing the same thing.
Yeah, fascinating. So that's solid gold what you just said there, because the name of the game here is bang for your buck. And if you're spending 20 minutes or 30 minutes a day, splitting it up into 2 or 3 doses versus doing it all at once makes all the difference in the world over an extended period of time. And this reminds me of the research that's been done on distance runners and how their bone cells become numb to the impact over a certain period of time. And then when you compare them to multi-directional athletes, the bone density is like night and day. And I even saw a study where people who were inactive had higher bone densities on average than distance runners.
Yeah, again, it's about this idea of signal to wear and tear.
Mhm.
And so the longer you go, the more wear and tear you get. And yes, the body is going to give a signal that we need to make more of this, but that signal is short. So the bone is actually super sensitive. And so the smallest study I've ever seen is in a Japanese group. They had young girls jump as high as they could 4 times, 3 times a week, and they saw an increase in bone density. So Roblin and Baar, who've done the most extensive work in bone, show that by 40 loads that are 2 to 3 times body weight, that at the end of 40 loads, doing 400 loads, doing 4,000, whatever, has no better effect on bone mass than doing 40 loads. And if you do 40 loads and then you wait, again, 8 hours, 6 to 8 hours seem to be the peak, you actually get that effect of those 40 loads back. We did the same thing in tendons and ligaments. So we loaded our engineered ligaments for 10 minutes. We got a maximal signal. If we waited 2 hours and did the exact same 10-minute signal, we got about 40% of the signal, even though the exercise was exactly the same.
Wow. So,
If we wait 6 to 8 hours, now we get that full signal back again.
wow.
And so that's the important component of it, is that, you know, the longer you exercise for, yeah, your heart and your skeletal muscle get a continuous adaptation.
Mhm.
So the longer you go, the better it is for your heart and your muscle. But for your connective tissues, they stopped listening after 10 minutes. I always tell people it's a lot like my 17-year-old daughter. She'll listen to me for those 5 minutes of time, and then after 5 minutes, she's like, "Yeah, whatever, Dad." And it's gonna take a long time before she has come back around to listening to me even for that 5 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes. So you treat your connective tissues much like teenagers. You have to give them a little bit of information a couple of times a day, and that's the best you're gonna do.
It's a great example. I would love to dive into the idea of progression with this training. So you're talking 8 weeks. We know that intensity is kind of more or less fixed, that we don't want to go above 40 or 50% of maximal intensity. I would understand as a clinician that some people would have to slowly work their way up to even doing that point. And each step in that direction is still positive, even though we might not be, say, getting the max bang for the buck at the cellular level, factoring in everything else, like making sure they're not getting sore afterwards and all these other things kind of plays into that decision-making process. But once they get up to the point where they're doing 4 rounds, 30 seconds, and we should just mention that the rest period is about
About 2 minutes.
2 minutes in between. Okay, so we're doing 4 rounds, 30-second isometric holds with 2 minutes of rest in between, and maximum of twice a day with about 8 hours in between. But how does progression build into this? Like, how is week 4 going to look different from week 1?
Yeah, it's a good question. We really don't know. So what we know is that if we go too hard, so if we try and push too much, we're gonna have a negative effect. So whenever we say like, "Oh yeah, 40%," we're doing it at a 0 to 2 on the pain scale. Maybe you're gonna give 2, but ideally like it to be a 0 pain. And so for me, what I wanna do is I wanna first progress time, because a lot of times when you're first starting out, you can't make it a full 30 seconds.
Mhm.
So we're gonna progress up time, we're gonna progress up the number of repetitions up to about 4, so we get up to about that's an 8-minute load there.
Yeah.
And so after that, we don't know that it's really beneficial to really jack up the load or do anything else. What's gonna happen is we're gonna get to all we're trying to do is make sure that the cueing that we give is I want you to put on load. I want you to feel tension across the tissue, but no pain. And so for like our rock climber studies, basically they were just told to hang from your fingertips, go down, feet are still on the ground, maybe about 40% of your body mass. I just want you to feel tension through the flexors of the hand. And you can feel that tension. You'll feel it through if you have a proximal hamstring tendon. If you can get the load right and you can get it, oh yeah, that I feel that. It's tight. I can feel there's something there. That's all we're looking for.
Mhm.
We don't have to then jack up the load through there.
Okay.
What's going to happen is that as we get better, now what we can start doing is we can start doing more of our dynamic loading, more of our strength training, more of our maybe game playing or practicing.
See.
So now we can get back to the fact that we're going to go out and we're going to say you're playing pickleball and you've hurt your calf.
Mhm.
Now what you're going to do is you're going to do your 30-second isos. Once those 30-second isos are have controlled the pain, now you can go and you can start playing again. But that doesn't mean you stop doing your 30-second isos.
Mhm.
The 30-second isometric holds are going to be done after you've done your gameplay,
Okay.
because remember, stress shielding. So what's happening is over time, as I play my first or second sets of pickleball, I'm loading, getting those quick movements in there. The strong part is starting to get a little bit weaker. It's starting to get tired. It's getting wear and tear. So now as I go to load my 30 seconds, it's actually easier for me to get the scar part, because the strong parts have been fatigued.
So this
And
was
so
pre-exhaustion in the gym.
yeah, and so now what I can do is I can come back, and so now what I'm doing is I'm increasing the load that I have outside of the gym.
Mhm.
And then I'm just maintaining some of those isometric holds to make sure that the tissue is continuing to get the signal it needs throughout the whole tissue and not just the strong parts in order to regenerate completely. And then after 8 weeks, all we're doing is we're coming in and we're doing a few sessions a week where we're just trying to maintain that. Yeah, if there's anything I picked up this week because I was playing a little bit harder because feeling really good, so I played a little bit more. Now I'm going to go back in. I'm going to hit that Achilles from both a bent leg and a straight leg position, and I'm going to do those, and I'm going to do that, 3 times a week, maybe, just to make sure that I didn't pick up anything new that's going to slowly develop into more chronic of a problem over time. So I wouldn't necessarily increase load. Yeah.
That's solid gold, what you just gave. And I want to go back and explain to people. So there's no point in ever going higher than 40 or 50% because that's kind of like you're getting enough bang for the buck that there's no reason to risk going higher and introduce the potential of bad things happening.
Yeah, exactly. It's not that there's a risk. It's just that it's the minimal effective dose. So why do I need to do 100% if I can get the exact same thing from doing 50%? And so I've got a student in the lab right now who takes our little engineered ligaments and he either stretches them 2%, which is kind of physiologically what a ligament stretches, or he stretches them 4%. And he gets the exact same benefit from doing 2% as he does from 4%.
Beautiful.
We do the same thing in animals where we can electrically stimulate so the animal produces 100% maximal force, or we can change the current that goes through. And so now instead of producing 100% force, they produce 50% force. When they produce 50% force, they still get the exact same adaptation that we're looking for, which is the increase in collagen content and other things.
Yeah.
So there's no reason to go at 100%. If I can get everything from 50%, why would I go up to 100% and do that extra work?
Yeah, super, super good. So that's crystal clear. There's also no need to ever go above 4 sets of 30 seconds. It's not like if you do twice as many sets or hold them for a minute, you're not getting additional benefit for that extra work. You're just getting wear and tear.
Yeah, so the stress relaxation, about 75% of the relaxation I'm going to get over a 2-minute period happens within the first 30 seconds. So it happens really quickly. It's exponential decay, and then it kind of plateaus. So if I go for a minute, I get maybe 10 or 15% more, but that 10 or 15% more for most of us isn't really enough to wait for a minute and a half instead of just doing a 30-second hold. And when I do more than 4 repetitions, I'm already outside of the 10-minute zone that we kind of use as our base level for saying, okay, this is our minimal effective dose. So when we did this with rock climbers, it wasn't just the elite rock climbers. It was every rock climber who used this one rock climbing app. There was a training program that you could do, which is called these no hangs. We call them Abrahangs after the guy who created them. But basically it was 40% of your maximum, or you could be in another group called max hangs where you put on as much as you could hold to your maximum amount. So now we've got people who are using 40% of body weight and people who are using maybe twice body weight. And now those people, we studied them for 30 days of training. The grip strength improvement from those two groups was exactly the same. There were a subset of people who did both of them. They trained with both types and they actually had an additive effect. So they got the 3% from the low intensity, long duration isometric holds. They got a 3% from the really heavy isometric, short isometrics. And then when they did them both together, they got a 6% improvement.
I see.
So most of us, when we're going to go out and do the activity we like to do, that's going to be like the max hold. That's going to be like our running around sprinting or change of direction. We're playing pickleball. We're doing paddle. Whatever it is, we're changing direction. We're getting that high dynamic load. And what we're now going to add with the 30-second isos is that's going to give us the thing that's helping us to transmit the force from that bigger, stronger muscle that we've created to the bone to allow us to move better. Yeah. So if you like to lift weights and you're doing all of your heavy weightlifting, there's going to be a little bit of a stimulus for your tendon. But if I then add some longer hold isometrics, I'm going to get a tendon specific signal. When I do that, There's one thing. So the tendon specific signal means that I'm going to improve force transfer. The second thing is because it's a low weight, it doesn't actually affect the muscle very much.
Mhm.
A low weight isometric, I could do those every single day. It's not going to make my muscle feel tired. I'm not going to get soreness. I'm not going to get any of that. And so now what it actually does is it decreases that, and I can train a little bit more frequently or harder the next time.
Mhm.
And so the result is I get an additive effect of combining these types of higher dynamic movements,
Mhm.
running, jumping, pickleball, weightlifting, whatever it is, with these isometric holds. And what it results in is it giving me a an additive effect of the two stimuli together.
That's also fantastic because it literally weaves return to sport into the therapy.
Yeah. And too often what happens is, look, I'm training really, really well, and then I get an injury.
Yeah.
And what do I do is I train very differently when I'm injured than when I'm training well. When I'm healthy and training well, I'm going to do a lot of fast movements. I do a lot of running, jumping, all of those sprints and change of directions. When I'm injured, what I do is I do a lot of slow, heavy isometric or other types of very slow movements. So why would I go through a cycle instead of just incorporating those isometric holds throughout my training
Mhm.
so that I can prevent the injury that's going to make me train differently in the first place?
That's
And
fantastic.
so what we tend to do, or what I do personally, is yeah, I'll lift weights a couple of times a week. I'm running a bunch of times a week. And then what I'm doing is I'm doing mobility work. And that's just long hold isometric, low intensity isometric holds for multiple times a week. So that's like 4 to 6 times a week because it's not going to hurt my muscles. So my muscle soreness isn't going to be bad. That means that it's not going to affect the weight that I lift in the gym. And it's going to make me healthier for my runs. And when I play basketball or when I do other sports, I'm going to perform better because my body is working better. And so we did a little video if people are wondering what isometric holds look like. We've got a little video that we did through the UC Davis Medical Center, that I did an isometric hold. I gave a few examples of them, and just that'll help people to kind of visualize what we're talking about.
I've seen it. I'll certainly link to it in the description below this video once it goes live.
Okay, perfect.
But I think that I want to circle back to what you just said to hammer home for everybody so that they really understand that your mobility work is isometric holds. This is highly unusual and not something that's common, which is why I'm bringing people's attention to it. So you're doing static muscle contractions where you're holding presumably at 50% of your max in a bunch of different joints in your body to maintain mobility as a whole.
Right. Absolutely. And so that's basically what we're trying to do is just to come in and say, look, we know we don't need to put tons of load through. So we have a company that we're starting up called Sinuous, where basically it's just going to allow you to measure how much load you're putting through there. So, but I know that if I do, say, a lunge where I have 1 foot in front, 1 foot in back, the most load that I'm putting through my leg is going to be maybe a little bit more than my body weight. So even less than my body weight because I'm on 2 legs. So it's going to be like 75% of my body weight. So if I do a lunge and I hold that lunge for 30 seconds, I know that I've gotten a good stimulus for my Achilles because I'm going to let my knee go out further than my toe. That's totally fine because that's going to give me an Achilles stretch. It's going to also give me a patellar tendon, a quad tendon stretch. On the other side, it's going to give me a hip flexor because I'm contracting the hip flexor to help me keep my balance there. So that's giving me isometric on my hip flexor. I'm also got my quad tendon and my patellar tendon on the other side in a lengthened position because I'm up on my toe over there. So now what I've got is I've gotten pretty much half the joints of my lower body in just one move.
Mhm.
I'll switch sides. I'll do that. I'll do maybe a squat, maybe some upper body ones. If I have shoulder issues, if I have elbow issues, I can come in and do very specific things there.
Mhm.
And all it's doing is it's basically walking through a series that looks a lot like people have done for generations with Tai Chi or with Pilates or with yoga. And it's just allowing to say that, look, the component of yoga that's actually changing the musculoskeletal system isn't when I have my legs straight and I'm just trying to passively hold, say, a hamstring stretch. What it is when I'm in, say, a warrior position, which is a lunge, and I have to hold it there for a long time
Mhm.
because that's the thing that's actually causing the tissues to change. It's giving me that muscle contraction. It's giving me the load on all of my tendons. That isometric load is giving me the positive load that comes through yoga, or Pilates does the same thing, or Tai Chi does the same thing. What do they have in common? Very slow movement, holds in specific positions that are positions where, you are stretching and strengthening the muscles and tendons within your lower body.
Mhm.
So a lot of Tai Chi, you're in a squat position and you're doing all of these moves with your upper body. That you're concentrating on your upper body moves. Well, you have to hold your squat to be in position. That's the component that we're doing. That's all we're doing when we call it mobility. So lots of people have done that mobility. It's just that we focus on, oh, how far can I go back with my arm and hold it there? That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about something else that's actually going to load the tissue the way the tissue is designed to be loaded. And if we hold it for long enough, we're going to get reorganization of the structures so that they work better.
And the 10-minute time frame that you're referencing for this includes the rest periods. I want to make that clear
Yeah.
for everybody who's listening. So there's 10 minutes, there's a 10-minute window every 8 hours where your tissues are receptive to this type of stimulus. And that 10 minutes includes the rest period. So we're talking 30 seconds of effort with 50 seconds of rest, or 2 minutes of rest when you're.
And you don't even have to rest. If I'm going to do my right leg, I can do my left leg next. So I can go straight to my left leg. If I'm going to do, say, something that's going to be for my patellar tendon in a long position, so a highly bent knee, I can do my patellar tendon in a shorter position.
Okay.
So it doesn't have to be that I'm resting for 2 minutes. It just means that I'm going to come back to that one in a couple minutes
Okay.
when my muscle is a little bit more recovered. Because the first time you do this, your muscle is going to be like screaming at you because it's not easy for your muscle to hold you in that position because your tendon is relaxing. Your muscle has to work really hard.
Yeah.
And then also I can do 10 minutes for my lower body, but I can also do a separate 10 minutes for my upper body. If I have, say, a shoulder and I have an Achilles, it doesn't mean that 10 minutes total for the two of them because they're very different tissues. It means that the tissues within the cells within the tissue that I'm loading,
Okay.
they're going to stop responding after 10 minutes. If I'm loading my upper body for 10 minutes and then I go and I start loading my lower body, totally different structures.
Okay. So
And
the
so,
difference
so
is specific to the target tissue.
yeah. And we actually did it where we said, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to load. So we just loaded at different loading rates. So we did 1 hertz, 0.1 hertz, and 0.01 hertz. So that's 1 cycle per second, 1 cycle every 6 to 10 seconds. And it didn't matter how many cycles we did. At 10 minutes, they were peak. So that if we waited until they did, say, 100 cycles, then the ones that were doing the 0.01, the signal we got was really low. It would be moderate and high. But if we then took them all at 10 minutes, they were all exactly the same.
Huh.
So doesn't matter whether we run or walk. It doesn't matter whether we do 40 loads or 4 loads. What we're getting is we're just getting those cells are just getting loaded for that period of time.
Amazing. So it's like a sponge, and there's only so much water it can hold.
Exactly.
Yeah. Can you talk to me about the importance of, if we were designing the optimal recovery program for somebody who had a tendinopathy? We know that we need load. We know that it is the most critical factor. In your words, the tendon does not exist without the load. I'm 100% on board with you. What do we need to do to support for maximum healing and repair? You said it's an 8-week time period. What can we do to move things along or
Yeah. So
advance the process?
probably one of the better researched aspects is nutritional components like, say, dietary collagen. Dietary collagen is providing some of the substrates, so the glycine and proline that's very rich in collagen. You can get that from a collagen supplement. But again, the key thing here is it's a lot like muscle building. We all know that we need this leucine-rich protein to build muscle. But if I just eat lots of leucine-rich protein and I sit on my butt, I'm still not going to get any muscles.
Mhm.
I need to do the exercise. So 95% of it comes through the exercise. Maybe 5% of it comes through having a little bit extra dietary collagen and vitamin C. The vitamin C is essential as well. Absolutely essential for our cells to be able to secrete the collagen that they make. So that's, well, there's some good evidence there, and it's building. As far as other things, people go and they look at peptides. They look, oh, well, if I inject these peptides or if I take these, there's no evidence that those actually work to any great degree. So we tested one of the most popular ones, which is BPC 157 in our engineered ligaments, which are basically ligaments where we have total control. And so when we put that peptide on there, had no effect at all. It didn't make it worse, but it didn't make it better. So there's not any really beneficial effect to, we haven't found any peptides that can support that. There are some, we've discovered a couple of drugs that maybe are supporting the kind of repair of the collagen. It's actually supporting the development of the collagen.
Estrogen.
Estrogen will have some effects. The effect of estrogen is, it's interesting. It's not that it increases collagen synthesis. It actually blocks some of the breakdown.
I see.
And so you just end up with a little bit more collagen there. So that's not necessarily what you need for when you're actually trying to regenerate a tissue, because you want turnover to happen when you're regenerating, because you got to get rid of the stuff that's there in order to put in new stuff.
Sure.
So it's not necessarily something like that. It's just a couple of FDA approved drugs that don't have this on their use label, on their FDA approved uses, but they're off target or off label effects that we've found. And then for us, the biggest thing when we start talking about drugs is that there are a lot of drugs that a lot of people take that are really bad for tendons. And the most common of these seem to be these angiotensin type 2 or angiotensin 2 type 1 receptor inhibitors, or the ARBs. So these are drugs that people take for high blood pressure, hypertension, and they're associated with about a 7.5-fold increase in Achilles tendon rupture.
You name a few of the brand names, if you don't mind?
Yeah, so like losartan, irbesartan. So they're basically the sartan drugs. They do have other brand names that I don't know as well. I know more of the chemical names. But the sartans are taken by about 15 million Americans every day. And they do have the highest rate of tendon rupture of any class of drugs ever kind of discovered. And so we've done a bunch of work that's not quite published yet, but it really shows that that's significantly affecting the ability to build tendon. So if you are on a antihypertensive medicine, you just want to check to make sure what it is, because as you get further away from the angiotensin receptor, they have less of an association with tendon rupture. So the angiotensin converting enzymes, they only have like a 30% increase. And then if you go back to like aldosterone or other things that are up in the pathway, they have no association that we can tell at all. And so it does seem like there's a specificity there. So that would be a counter. But doctors actually use them when they're adhesions. So if you have a tendon rupture, a lot of times problematically, the tendon will adhere to some other structure. They treat with the sartan drugs because they've known for years that it decreases adhesions, and they thought, oh, this is great. The problem for us is that, well, if it's decreasing adhesions, it's doing that by decreasing collagen, and it's doing that by making the tissue much more likely to rupture. So again, there is a sense that people understand this, but it's not necessarily well enough known so that if people are active and they're on these medicines, just one of those things to consider.
Yeah. What about Cipro and corticosteroids?
So Cipro is kind of the classic, but Cipro increases Achilles tendon rupture. So those are the fluoroquinolone antibiotics. They increase tendon rupture about 3.5-fold. So the sartans are about twice as bad for tendons. And so we also see that in a related thing in people with, or in kidney disease, you see an increase in tendon pain. So chronic musculoskeletal pain, almost half of all people with kidney disease have that. And one of the reasons for that is that the tendon quality goes down. And so you're not stabilizing your joints, you're not stabilizing these structures as well. And so you get an increase in chronic musculoskeletal pain. So there's a bunch of people who have this increase. Another group that has an increase are people who have estrogen receptor positive breast cancer,
Mm.
because you get put onto an aromatase inhibitor. And so you're low in estrogen. You can't produce estrogen by converting testosterone into estrogen, which is what your aromatase is doing. And then those individuals tend to have a lot of musculoskeletal pain, a lot of tendon pain. And so again, part of that is because of what we talked about with lysyl oxidase and how it's changing the stiffness. And as a result, you suddenly don't have any estrogen, and now you have testosterone building up because you can't convert testosterone to estrogen. So now you have this rapid increase in stiffness that's actually making the tissue much more brittle and much more difficult, and much more painful. So there's a number of different conditions that are associated with these kind of chronic musculoskeletal pain that we can explain by their effects on tendon. So again, it's just one of those things to keep in the back of your head, is that what we talk about is we talk about people who know they have tendon problems, but most of the people, they know they have pain. They don't necessarily know that it's a tendon, but oh, it's painful when I do this. What you can do is just do that and then just hold it there. So if it's painful when you extend your knee, just get a pillow, try and extend your knee a little bit with a little tiny bit of force so that there's no pain, but you're getting tension through that same area that hurts a lot. And what you'll find is the pain goes away quite a bit.
Mhm.
And that's really what we're looking to do, is we're looking to increase your ability to move pain-free.
Absolutely. Dr. Baar, thank you so much. This was
Yep.
above and beyond. I love the clarification about the progressions and this idea that there is a cap for this tendon specific training, and where we really have room to play with progressions is in our more other activities and sport specific stuff for athletes. But for the non-athlete, it's the things that you like to do outside of the gym net.
Exactly. So what you're doing is, as you're doing your isometrics, what you'll be able to do is you'll be able to get up and down in the garden more. You'll be able to do all of those things. You'll be able to play with your, kids, grandkids, all of those other things that you wanted to do more because you're doing those. Just remember to come back to them and do them afterwards so that you continue to gain that benefit.
Well, that's what you were talking about with your mobility routine, is that it's kind of woven into your overall fitness routine, where you said you're doing it 3 times a week. So super helpful. Really appreciate your time. And thank you for the nuggets.
Absolutely. No, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
If you enjoyed this conversation and you took something away from it, hit that thumbs up button and leave me a comment down below. Beyond that, I just want to thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I'll see you next time.